Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. Big day for 25s, so get on out there. Get yourself a lottery ticket. If you work in the federal government, might be a good idea. Grab yourself a lottery ticket regardless. Maybe if you work at MSNBC, likely also. Especially if you're not white, I guess. I don't know. They seem to be firing everybody left and right, not only in the federal government, but over at MSNBC as well. I assume, I don't know. I assume they think they're going to shift right or centrist somehow, and I don't know exactly what they think they're going to capture in terms of audience. Who knows? I guess we'll have to wait and see, and then somebody who watches it can call in and tell us what happens on MSNBC. I assume, or maybe Morning Joe will tell people who still watch Morning Joe what's going on the rest of the channel. We won't know. And we won't know what's going on in government or elsewhere. By the way, plenty, of course, happening. Plenty of terrible appointments happening. I guess the new Trump administration full of, well, as I was thinking this morning, Arabian horse judge kind of appointments. Like, does everybody remember Mike Brown being appointed as head of FEMA by George W. Bush? And then, of course, we had the Hurricane Katrina disaster, only to find out that the guy in charge of Federal Emergency Management Agency had no idea how to run the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and he had previously been the guy in charge of supervising the judges of the International Arabian Horse Association or something like that. And, well, we have plenty of those things going on now as well. And I was saying this morning, in the past, you could look at an appointment like that anyway, and say, well, at least FEMA is staffed with people who know the job. It'll be very irritating for them and totally unfair for them to run the place while somebody who knows nothing and probably cares very little about. I don't know. I'm not certain that Mike Brown wasn't dedicated to trying to do a good job at FEMA. He just, didn't have the background. I don't know if he could put anybody there and just say, learn about federal emergencies and then manage them. But he may or may not have been doing his best, but it was certainly unfair to everybody who actually knew the job inside out and had done it for years, and just say, well, you're not a politically connected person. You're a peon. We'll just keep you down here servicing, as service staff to the appointees. But that's actually kind of the way it is in every administration and everywhere. Although occasionally you will bring in someone from the outside because they have expertise of some sort in that area, even if it's not governmental expertise, or people who are in government but in the legislative branch, but as a result, had plenty of time to read about policy and management of the agencies, whatever. But you just bring people in from out of nowhere. Who knows what you're going to get? And this morning I was reminded of this as I saw, well, why not? We can start here. It's one of many things we can spend our time on. I was pointed to a Vanity Fair piece by Catherine Eban, Eban. I don't know how she pronounces the last name. I never know. And I love talking about how I don't know. But this is, I guess we've done it again. America's food safety at the FDA. Food safety now in the hands of Don Jr.'s hunting buddy. Seems pretty good. I don't know whether the guy has any interest in, even casual hobbyist interest in healthy food or something. I have no idea. But maybe Catherine does. As federal health agencies are gutted with abandon, of course, thanks to Elon Musk, a Florida attorney with a history of hunting with the president's son, thanks, that's great, that's helpful, has been put in charge of food safety at the FDA, overseeing the nation's food supply, infant formula, and more. And I wonder offhand, I don't know what kind of guy he is, but I'm just wondering, the kind of person that ends up as Don Jr.'s hunting buddy being in charge of infant formula. Like, would he know how to mix infant formula and feed an infant? Or is that, the wife's job or the nanny's job or something like that in his mind? I'm just curious. I mean, the instructions are pretty simple, and a fairly competent person could read them and follow them. It's not terribly difficult, but I just wonder if you knew offhand that it even had to be mixed, actually. Anyway, the story goes like this. Late last week, amid mass purges of key personnel at the nation's health agencies, a Florida attorney with a surprisingly slim resume was named acting deputy commissioner for human foods at the Food and Drug Administration. That's my favorite kind of food, actually. So, that's of some interest. And I may or may not have the ability to read this thing in Pocket. I think I parked it there for these purposes last night. Let's keep going. This role, which, by the way, is not subject to Senate approval, and that will be another topic of the day today, is an important one. In it, Kyle Diamantis, 37, all of 37 years old, will be responsible for ensuring the safety of roughly 80% of the nation's food supply. The already overtaxed division is vital to public health, responsible for everything from overseeing the complex manufacturing of infant formula to responding to deadly bacterial contamination and managing food supplies in the wake of hurricanes and floods. Diamantis' LinkedIn profile is, I like this one, a study in brevity. He received a law degree from the University of Florida in 2013. Congratulations, by the way. He started his next listed job as an attorney at the law firm Jones Day in Miami in 2021, ascending to partner last year. Now, I puzzled over this for a minute, and there's in the next paragraph, you'll see part of the reason for the puzzling. His now archived Jones Day bio described him as having, quote, more than 10 years of experience advising food, cosmetic, dietary supplement, drug, and other life sciences and consumer goods clients on a wide range of regulatory compliance and enforcement matters. Prior to that job, he worked as a senior associate at the Orlando office of the law firm Baker Donaldson. And the puzzling part was I went back and reread that. So wait a second. He got his law degree in 2013. His next listed job is in 2021. And my reading of that initially was, so he got his law degree in 2013 and he's unemployed until 2021. And how do you square that with the 10 years of experience? And then I realized, oh yeah, okay. On LinkedIn, you're talking resume format. And so I guess the next listed job, like in terms of its position on the page, is the most recent, the current job, and then working backwards chronologically because resume. So I don't know. That was a little confusing. So, all right. 2013, he works he makes it to senior associate at Baker Donaldson at some point. Then he has 10 years of experience somewhere in between. At least there's this, right? Advising food, cosmetic, dietary supplement, drug, and other life sciences and consumer goods clients on a wide range of regulatory compliance and enforcement matters. So, white collar defense, I assume, and corporate matters. And if you're a food and an FDA regulated industry and you're struggling with the FDA and I don't want to take the poison out of our infant formula. It's very expensive to do so. This is your man. But at least that's something, right? It goes on to say Diamantis' limited experience for such a major regulatory position, when compared with the experience of his predecessor, appears to have been offset by another significant qualification. The young attorney is a friend and hunting buddy of Donald Trump Jr., the president's firstborn son, Vanity Fair has learned. And there's an extensive recitation of the evidence on that, pictures of the two of them together with dead things that they've shot, presumably. And, people are hunters. We don't have to pass on that here, but you could, and they spend some time talking about the essential gore and horror of it all. But then the more important part, just skipping down to here, the nation's controversial new health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has decried what he describes as the mass poisoning of Americans by the big food lobby. In taking the helm as overseer of the nation's health agencies, he's set his sights on transforming what and how Americans eat. His stated agenda includes limiting chemical additives in food, ridding school lunches of processed foods, and purging safety net food programs of sugary drinks. He's also pledged to rid the FDA of what he claims are compromised regulators, more beholden to industry interests than their stated missions. Diamantis' past experience representing food and beverage industry clients appears to be just the type of conflict Kennedy Jr. has critiqued. Well, what do you know? That's going to be an interesting situation. An obvious ally in that effort would have been the FDA's Human Foods Program, which, by its own description, oversees all FDA activities related to food safety and nutrition. Most recently, under the Biden administration, the division oversaw the banning of food dye red number 3, a move right in line with Kennedy Jr.'s stated Make America Healthy Again priorities. But late last week, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency purged the division of an estimated 89 staff members, leading to the resignation of James Jones, the Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods, an experienced regulator. Jones had spent almost 20 years with the Environmental Protection Agency before joining the FDA in 2023 to lead the newly reorganized Foods Division. In his resignation letter, Jones called the indiscriminate mass terminations one more roadblock to achieving the secretary's stated objectives. He still thinks he's going to do that. Of making America healthy again. He added the food program staff at FDA is the envy of the world in its technical, professional, and ethical standards. The secretary's comments impugning the integrity of the food staff, asserting that they're corrupt based on falsities, is a disservice to everyone. Among the employees dismissed were those with highly technical expertise in nutrition, infant formula, food safety response, and even 10 chemical safety staff hired to review potentially unsafe ingredients in our food supply, according to Jones's letter. I can't believe that American consumers are going to support losing staff that protects the safety of the food that every one of us eats every day, said Susan Main, who served as the FDA's Director of Food Safety and Applied Nutrition from 2015 to 2023. Particularly horrifying, she says, are cuts to the infant formula team, which she successfully lobbied Congress to grow from 9 to 13 people. With cuts to such a small staff, she said, the whole program could dissolve and we would be in the biggest infant formula crisis you could ever imagine. As if a reminder was needed of the job's life and death stakes, the FDA on Friday announced a recall of listeria-tainted frozen nutritional shakes that had been sold to nursing homes, among other institutions, and had been linked to 11 deaths and 37 hospitalizations. Thanks a lot. That should be really great. I can't wait for more death. But, I'm sure he'll figure out something, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, I guess if you really believed that A, Kennedy had an agenda at all of any coherence, B, that he was really going to work hard to try to implement it, you'd think he'd be upset about that. But there's a lot of this going on inside of the Trump, quote-unquote, administration, I guess. And by the way, I guess I should say, quote-unquote, Trump, quote-unquote, administration. He's not in charge of it, and certainly nothing's being administered here. But I think I parked here somewhere, probably. Anyway, oh yeah, right. Some very interesting developments. Something we didn't discuss yesterday, except we did make mention of it, which was a big piece of news over the weekend. Dan Bongino, Bongino, I guess is how he pronounces his last name, who, as I recall, was like Trump's caddy or something, and then sort of made himself into a government-ish kind of person during the first Trump administration. Super loyalist and a nutbag on top of it all. And apparently kind of a roid rage dude has gotten himself converted into the FBI's deputy director, which is really interesting. I think he has some law enforcement experience as well. But his resume is a bit thin for that job too, and it's also pointed out, I guess in the wake of, I'll also add all this other commentary, since we see somebody who's, appointed from the white-collar defense world of backing up the food industry in its food purity fights with the FDA, appointed to help implement, supposedly, Kennedy's agenda of getting all these additives and chemicals out of food. We are also reminded that across the entirety of the administration, people are being fired for their expertise everywhere and then replaced with people who have none. And we're also finding infighting among various branches of the administration, up to and including Elon Musk ordering everybody to send him emails, listing 5 things that they accomplished last week and that you're fired if you don't answer. And then one by one, all the agencies issuing notes to their people saying, no, that's not going to happen. And not only that, don't answer the email. We'll be the ones reporting on what our agencies have accomplished, and we'll be the ones asking questions of our people. Thank you very much. So that was kind of interest. And links to what's going on here in the story. One, of course, just the fact that Dan Bongino is, back in government is bad enough. Making him deputy director of the FBI, bad on top of bad. A little bit of a crap sandwich, I guess you could call it there. Though you'd probably use a different word for it, the type of sandwich. Can we get the computer to respond at all to the clicks? That would be great. Thank you. I'd like to open up one of the stories that we kind of will. All right, no? I guess not. All right, well, we'll reload the Pocket page and see if we can't get the thing to respond here. From Wired magazine, which, again, hitting it out of the park on just about everything, has this interesting tidbit about Dan Bongino. And he'll give us a good background on who he is and why he's inappropriate as a deputy FBI director. But long story short, in case we don't get to it, Kash Patel, as you know, confirmed recently as FBI director, which was a disaster all by itself and will, cause all sorts of mayhem in the months to come as an ideologue and a weirdo conspiracy theorist is put in charge of the FBI and can launch investigations and who knows what else he's going to be able to do to disrupt the lives of political enemies, his own and Donald Trump's and Elon Musk's presumably as well. And now he'll be assisted by Dan Bongino, who has kind of dedicated his life to that. In between administrations when he was out of power, he was did what we do. Podcasting, etc. But of course, used his platform to threaten to investigate, arrest, have murdered, destroy, otherwise disappear everybody that he didn't like in broad swaths. I hate liberals. We're going to kill them all. This kind of guy. And he's going to be deputy director of the FBI. But as it turns out, Kash Patel had his own ideas about who would be his deputy. And in fact, apparently just traditionally, but nothing traditional matters anymore. Traditionally, the deputy director is selected from among the ranks of existing FBI special agents, high-ranking special agents, basically to give the director legitimacy among the troops there. Special agents who have been on with the FBI for years, even if you bring in an experienced law enforcement person, if they're not knowledgeable in the ways of the FBI, the rest of the staff looks askance at them. So you make an FBI agent deputy director so the agents can be sure that, the perspective of the agency is in fact being represented in the decision making. I mean, to the extent the deputy is able to influence the director. And so I guess this is the first person to hold that job who is not selected from among the ranks of the FBI, and it's a particularly troublesome person all by themselves. So how Dan Bongino went from InfoWars, yes, to FBI deputy director. Oh no, is basically how you should react to that. Dan Bongino rose through the ranks of, not the FBI, but right-wing media, thanks to his unflinching loyalty to Donald Trump and willingness to push baseless conspiracies, including about the FBI. Let's read a little bit here before we take our first break. Dan Bongino has spent the last decade building a career in right-wing media based on his sycophantic support of President Donald Trump and his willingness to engage in endless conspiracy theories about everything from COVID-19 to the 2020 elections to the FBI, which he has said should no longer exist in its current form. And now it doesn't. It's headed by two idiots who hate it. The FBI is no longer a law enforcement entity, Bongino wrote on X in 2023. It is an oppo research firm for Democrats. That's the problem with the FBI. Too infiltrated by Democrats. Yeah. With an armed political enforcement branch. He also wrote previously that he wants to, quote, disband the FBI and boosted conspiracy theories about its role in the Capitol insurrection. I don't trust these people at all, Bongino wrote under a Facebook video about the agency last year. So I'm sure his appointment will soothe frayed nerves inside the FBI ranks. On Sunday night, Trump announced on Truth Social, of course, that Bongino had been appointed as the agency's deputy director. And as I understand it, it's not a Senate-confirmed position. The appointment will do it all by itself. But he said it on Truth Social. Yes. Is that enough? I don't think so. Is there paperwork on his appointment? Probably. Did he sign it? There's no reason to believe that he didn't. But another of the big stories looming out here is Trump administration attorneys, DOJ attorneys, being thrashed about the head and neck in court in several locations, in several places, but certainly in the D.C. courts yesterday by one judge in particular, trying to figure out whether or not the DOGE weirdos have got the authority to do any of the things that they claim the authority to do, based on the question of, is the agency headed by someone who meets the criteria of the Appointments Clause of the Constitution? And so far the answer is no, because Trump and paperwork, man, he screwed up again, although, I think it was intentional, but he wouldn't do the paperwork that it takes to meet the requirements of the Appointments Clause. And there are various reasons probably for it. But the end result looks like it's going to be, one, possibly some sanctions for the attorneys who had to appear on behalf of the Department of Justice because of the way they're answering these questions. And two, the declaration, presumably at the end at some point, something in the neighborhood of voiding the work of the dodgy weirdos, possibly declaring the whole damn thing unconstitutional. Who knows? But all could have been avoided with some simple paperwork, which is the kind that Donald Trump loves the most. Official-looking documents that he signs at the Oval Office and holds up and shows everybody. Could have brought Elon Musk in, appointing him as the administrator of DOGE. And here, Trump says he's made Dan Bongino deputy director of the FBI. All we have so far in reading is the declaration on Truth Social. Did he have a little ceremony for Bongino? I may have missed it. I don't know. There's no real reason not to do this thing, but there was no real reason not to do it for Elon Musk either. I speculate that the idea was if he actually went through the appointments procedure, he'd have to file a financial disclosure, and he didn't want to do that. So he just said, just don't appoint me. Just tell these guys who you did appoint to follow my lead, or else they're fired, and we'll do what we can do. Except that renders the thing unconstitutional, so whoops. Anyway, so yes, Sunday night, Trump allegedly appoints Bongino deputy director. Bongino, who previously served as a police officer in New York and as a Secret Service agent protecting former presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, that's something, has no FBI experience, a trait he shares with Kash Patel, the QAnon-promoting Trump loyalist who last week was confirmed as the new director of the FBI. The deputy director role, which oversees day-to-day operations of the Bureau, has typically gone to an experienced FBI agent. In January, after he was nominated, but before he was confirmed by the Senate, Patel met with two senior members of the FBI Agents Association, and Patel, quote, privately agreed that, quote, the FBI deputy director should continue to be an onboard active special agent, as has been the case for 117 years, for many compelling reasons, unquote. This information was shared with the association's members in a memo sent on Sunday evening, 1 hour before Trump blew the whole thing up and announced Bongino's appointment, according to a copy of the newsletter reviewed by Wired. There's a ton of concern that someone with no experience in the Bureau is appointed to, in the view of agents, a position that is even more important than the director. One member of the association told Wired the person was granted anonymity, of course, for fears of recrimination from the new FBI leadership. Neither the FBI Agents Association nor a spokesperson for Patel immediately responded to a request for comment. Bongino is a Trump loyalist who has in his past referred to the president as, quote, an apex predator. A 3-time failed congressional candidate, he has risen from the fringes of the online conspiracy community to become one of the most prominent voices in right-wing media, leveraging online platforms as well as appearances on Fox News to push wild conspiracy theories about the agency he will now help to oversee and about the government generally. He's written a book called Follow the Money: The Shocking Deep State Connections of the Anti-Trump Cabal. Ooh, scary. A claimed proponent of free speech, Bongino is prone to rants and tirades against anyone who criticizes him, and he regularly blocks his critics on social media. Dan Bongino is a Trump sycophant whose focus has been delegitimizing any and all legal steps taken against the president and his allies. Matt Gertz, senior fellow at media watchdog Media Matters, who has tracked Bongino's career closely, tells Wired. And you know what? Matt's right. And don't confuse him with Matt Gaetz either. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue reading through this Dan Bongino piece, and I spent the break checking this out. I've confused him with another weirdo Dan hanger-on over in Trump world. So it's Dan Scavino, who's I guess in the last administration was the social media guy for the Trump White House, and he's now deputy chief of staff, I guess, in the new administration. It was Scavino who was the caddy who worked his way into Trump world and then became, deputy chief of staff of the White House. I don't know. There you go. Anyway, Dan Bongino, apparently quite weird in his own right, and let's continue on here. Where were we? And with Wired. We had just read about Matt Gertz giving his evaluation of Bongino, a Trump sycophant whose focus has been delegitimizing any and all legal steps taken against the president and his allies. Bongino's appointment hammers home that Trump is building a federal law enforcement team that will carry out his desires to punish his political enemies. You don't select a bomb-throwing podcaster who has declared that owning the libs is his sole focus in life to help run the FBI if you're aiming for an impartial bureau. Bongino served full-time in the NYPD from 1997 to 1999, so like 150 years ago, before joining the Secret Service. He left in 2011 to pursue a political career running for Senate as a Republican in Maryland in 2012. At the time, his opinion of his former employer was still very positive. The president was a wonderful guy, Bongino said of Obama in 2011. Oh my. Now, that should be disqualifying for him now. From what I saw, he was a wonderful father and a wonderful man, and he was very, very nice and very kind to me. And what's the payback here? In a memoir published in 2013, Bongino added that Obama was, quote, one of a group of men I would have gladly sacrificed my life for. Unfortunately, he did not have the opportunity to do that. Around the same time, though, Bongino began taking his first steps on a path that would ultimately lead him to becoming one of the biggest podcasters in the U.S. In 2013, he appeared on InfoWars, where he spoke to Alex Jones about the recent shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. After Jones said it's, quote, so over the top how authoritarian the Democrats have become. In response to school shootings, Bongino replied that Democrats aren't crisis managers, but are instead crisis leveraging and using a national emotional crisis to get you to believe things that simply aren't true. A decade later, Jones would be ordered by a court to liquidate his assets to pay the families of the victims of the shootings $1.5 billion. Bongino made multiple appearances on Jones's show in the run-up to his second failed congressional tilt in 2014, this time losing to incumbent Democratic Representative John Delaney in Maryland's 6th congressional district. During one of his InfoWars appearances, Bongino boosted the conspiracy theory that CIA agents were told to stand down during the terrorist attacks on the U.S. Special Mission and Annex in Benghazi, Libya. Bongino began his own podcast, The Dan Bongino Show, in 2015, and a year later made his third attempt at winning a seat in Congress, this time in Florida's 19th congressional district. Just a week before the vote, Bongino was recorded as having a full-on meltdown while speaking to a reporter from Politico, whom he called a real disgusting piece of shit. Yeah, you get the idea, right? In 2018, Bongino was handed his own 30-minute show on the National Rifle Association station, NRA TV. Bongino used his show to continuously hammer the work being conducted by special counsel and former FBI Director Robert Mueller, who at the time was investigating Trump and allegations that Russia interfered in the 2016 election, which it did. And I think, by the way, the activity of the last couple of days, just another brick in that wall, although why are we building a wall? I don't know. Another piece of evidence, though, in the already overwhelming amount of evidence of connection and collusion, you might even say, between Trump and the Russians. The latest news being a UN resolution condemning Russia for its aggression and invading Ukraine passed overwhelmingly in the UN General Assembly, where we're not yet represented. I mean, we've got an acting person there, I'm sure. Acting. Yes, of some kind, but not at least Stefanik, right? She hasn't yet resigned from the House to take this job because they can't afford to lose her vote. Anyway, apparently voting against the resolution were, of course, Russia and I think a couple of other fun places like North Korea, Iran, and a couple of others. And the United States now voting against resolutions condemning Russia for their aggression in invading a neighbor. Wow, that's a bit of a reversal and puts us in fantastic company. Even China abstained on this one, but the United States voted with the Russians. Political union with Russia to own the globalists. Anyway, back to Bongino's story here. Where do we leave off? I think just having talked about, Robert Mueller investigating the Russia connections and his being critical of that. Bongino pushed the conspiracy theory that the Trump campaign was being spied on a situation he dubbed Spygate and called the biggest scandal in American history. Well, I don't think so. During one show, discussing the pushback against the nomination of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, Bongino said, quote, "My entire life right now is about owning the libs. That's it. The libs have shown themselves through this Kavanaugh abomination of a process to be pure, unadulterated evil." Sounds perfect for the FBI. His robust defense of Trump caught the attention of producers at Fox, who booked him hundreds of times during this period, and it appears to be at this point that Trump first took notice of Bongino. In June of 2018, Trump quoted Bongino in 2 posts on Twitter after Bongino appeared on Fox and Friends slamming then CIA Director John Brennan. Bongino connected with Trump, the Daily Beast reported in October of 2018, writing that Trump spoke to his aides about, quote, malicious influences inside the FBI. I don't believe he used the word malicious on it, but that's what it says. Citing Bongino as the source of his information. Bongino's NRA TV show lasted less than a year, and in December of 2018, when it was announced his show was ending, Bongino reacted to critics saying he had been fired and poking fun at his demise. A month later, Fox News signed Bongino as a contributor, despite the fact that he had been repeatedly barred from the set of Shannon Bream's show on the station for coming unglued during a recording. In 2021, I'd be interested to read about the barring from the set. That's from the Daily Beast, but we'll stick with this for the moment. In 2021, Bongino became a Fox News host in his own right with a Saturday night show called Unfiltered, which he used to become one of the loudest voices pushing election denial conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. Again, perfect for the FBI. He used the platform to push the Great Replacement conspiracy theory and COVID-19 conspiracy theories. Bongino regularly railed against what he considered to be government overreach in relation to mask and vaccine mandates. During the attack on the Capitol, Bongino was temporarily suspended from Twitter for posting a video originally shared by Trump, and in the days after the attack, he raged about the decision to remove the messaging app Parler, in which he was an investor, from app stores. In 2022, YouTube finally took action against Bongino, who used to post his podcast on that platform, permanently banning him for spreading COVID-19 disinformation. However, Facebook continued to allow him to use its platform, where he had built up a massive audience, to promote his conspiracy theories. Bongino left Fox News in 2023, but he's continued to grow his podcast on the alternative video streaming site Rumble, to which Vice President J.D. Vance has ties and in which he is an investor. While Bongino has not been as vocal a supporter of the QAnon conspiracy as his boss, he has boosted QAnon figures in the past, and his supporters on pro-Trump and conspiracy channels have been cheering his new role. These supporters claim that he and Patel will finally unmask the, quote, deep state, a supposed group of government officials they believe have been waging a secret war on Trump. It's such a secret. Trump has brought together the dream team, the Avengers, one prominent QAnon promoter wrote. Get your popcorn ready. Whee! So, good news in general is what we're saying here. Now, somewhere along the line, I was reading something else that made me think, the next story I should read should be something. But did I make a note of it? Of course not. Let's see if we can't scroll down and see if I can spot it. Oh, maybe not. I don't know. But I can certainly head back over to Pocket and see what pops up. But I think it's been, the one there was the UN vote, and we did cover that one. I don't know. But I guess when I find it in Pocket and we start reading it, I'll say, oh, yeah, that's what I was thinking of when I wanted to break out and do the side commentary from the Bongino piece. Let's see. What have we got here? Oh, no, there's this one. Oh, so many things to bring up. Oh, yes. Okay. I guess in terms of law enforcement and equal application of the law, fairness, rule of law, et cetera, et cetera. We have this NBC Washington's Washington affiliate, Channel 4 here in NBC, I think is the first with this story, and then some additional commentary from Talking Point's memo about it. The story at NBC News was widely circulated on social media with quick commentary on exactly what was going on, but we'll give you the wider view here by reading the entire article. It's not quite as... They don't jump right to it in the headline and the story the way they do in social media. Florida congressman investigated for alleged D.C. assault as police probe their own handling. What is this supposed to mean? Representative Corey Mills of Florida, I don't think we've ever really had reason to talk about that guy, is being investigated after an alleged assault of a woman in the Wharf area. That's the area where he assaulted her. That's not what the kids are calling the area of her anatomy, which was assaulted, or anything like that. Who knows these days? But in D.C., assaulted a woman, and I guess it's alleged. I don't believe it's a family member, but well, anyway. The Metropolitan Police Department confirms Internal Affairs is also investigating how the department handled the case, which did not end in an arrest. What's happening here? Todd Oberg and Paul Wagner, and one other name, Rick Yarborough, all given credit in the byline for this piece for NBC4. D.C. Police, and it's important to differentiate here, just like it has been in Idaho, the difference between the county sheriff's department headed by the weirdo, and the city police department apparently headed by like a normal police person. Just yesterday we were discussing the difference there. D.C. police, though, confirm they are investigating an alleged assault of a 27-year-old woman by U.S. Representative Corey Mills, a Republican representing a district northeast of Orlando, calling it an active criminal investigation. The Metropolitan Police Department is also investigating its own handling of the incident, which did not result in an arrest. And I guess their question is, why not? Did we do some sort of kid glove treatment for a member of Congress? We shouldn't be doing that. Police reports obtained by News 4 show the alleged incident started at a penthouse in a luxury apartment building in the Wharf area of Southwest D.C. at about 1 p.m. on Wednesday. Mills's office told NBC News, this week, law enforcement was asked to resolve a private matter at Congressman Mills's residence. Congressman Mills vehemently denies any wrongdoing whatsoever and is confident any investigation will clear this matter quickly. The I-Team over at Channel 4 also reached out on Thursday afternoon to the alleged victim, whom we're not naming, but who is not the congressman's wife. Just so you know. In text messages, she said, yesterday, I contacted law enforcement to address a personal matter. Although the argument was emotionally charged, there was no physical abuse involved, she now says. She says, bruises were from medical conditions and activities from a recent overseas trip. She apparently went to, I don't know where, to Croatia and boxed for a couple rounds. I don't know. Why is she bruised? No one knows. But that is likely not the end of the investigation, the reporters note. D.C. police have 3 police reports on what happened, is the title of the next section. News 4 obtained multiple copies of the police report showing varying levels of detail about what allegedly happened inside that apartment when police arrived. The first police report, provided to News 4 by a source and confirmed by a second source familiar with the investigation, said her significant other for over a year, it is noted in parentheses, that's the description that's given here. I mean, it all took place in an apartment owned by Congressman Mills. Congressman Mills was there. His family wasn't. This woman was. The person in the apartment, whoever it may be, even if it isn't Mills for some strange reason, was her significant other for over a year, and he grabbed her, shoved her, and pushed her out of the door. The report says she showed the officer bruises on her arm, which appeared fresh. The first report goes on to note that during a phone call between the significant other, whoever that could be, and the alleged victim, she, quote, let officers hear subject one, now identified by MPD as Mills, it says in brackets. He let officers hear this person, Mills, instruct her to lie about the origin of her bruises. Eventually, subject one made contact with police and admitted that the situation escalated from verbal to physical, but it was severe enough to create bruising. When police arrived, the woman was in the lobby of the Salamander Hotel next door. The report says an officer was, quote, able to immediately identify the alleged victim out of all other patrons in the lobby by her demeanor, physically shaking and scared. According to the report, the responding police officer told the subject he would be placed under arrest. But then the woman approached police and recanted the details, including where the bruises came from. News 4 reached out to the responding officer but has not heard back. D.C. law says officers shall arrest someone if there is probable cause to believe they committed an intra-family offense resulting in physical injury, including pain. The second version of the police report obtained by News 4 a day after the alleged incident says only that officers responded to a family disturbance and there was no probable cause for an arrest. When News 4 reached out to D.C. police for comment, they provided a third version of the report Thursday night, which had changed once again, saying officers responded for a report of an assault and that the assault is being investigated. That's quite a swing back and forth. Quite a getting a little whiplash from this. D.C. police told News 4 that the focus of the internal investigation is why officers made no arrest and why the incident was reclassified as a family disturbance and not an assault. In a statement, the department told News 4, once MPD leadership became aware of this matter, there was an immediate review of our initial response to ensure all procedures were followed. MPD's Internal Affairs Bureau is currently investigating this matter. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser told News 4 an internal investigation is underway into, quote, making sure that all of our members did what they are supposed to do, according to MPD policy. She said she couldn't immediately comment on the investigation into Mills or the police reports. D.C. police told the I-Team that they sent an arrest warrant to the U.S. Attorney's Office on Friday. This is what Josh Marshall was commenting on. Talking Points memo. Ready for this? D.C. police told the I-Team they sent an arrest warrant to the U.S. Attorney's Office on Friday. Who runs the U.S. Attorney's Office? Well, it's the Trump administration now. The warrant has not been signed. That's all it takes, right? Trump and paperwork, man. Gee, why isn't this paper being signed so they can arrest Mills and do the job? Police said the case was sent back to them for further investigation. The U.S. Attorney's Office says it does not comment on uncharged cases. Sources familiar with how cases are handled say this type of back and forth is not uncommon, but may never result in charges. Mills' office did not respond to any inquiries from News 4 on Monday. Mills is a two-term congressman. Online bios say he's married and has 2 children. Previously, Mills said he might run for Senate for the seat left vacant by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So why not, right? 2 children, one for each of the, not from, but for each of the women he apparently is involved with. But we don't know whether there are more than that, nor we don't know there are more children than that either. No one really knows. It's just what the official bio says. So just thought that was, kind of interesting. And there's, you never know. Right? That's why you say delay everything, even if it's only for a couple hours or a couple days. You never know when another Republican is going to come up with a story that might ordinarily disqualify him from holding office. Not that he'll stop holding office. In fact, he's already looking for a promotion in the middle of all of this. But, I guess really the question is, did the U.S. Attorney's Office decline to charge him because if they charged him, they might end up losing another vote in all of this? He might end up having to resign, and then they wouldn't be able to do anything? I don't know. You don't know. But you might get some evidence to help you infer what happened by reading Josh Marshall's take on this. The big scandal brewing at the D.C. Attorney's Office. And it's not the gigantic beard on the guy in the background and this weird picture of Ed Martin, the current U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. Josh Marshall has this to add here. There's a big scandal brewing beneath the already big scandal of the alleged assault by Florida Congressman Corey Mills. But as yet, no one seems inclined to pull on the dangling thread. As you've probably already seen, Mills is accused of assaulting a woman who's not his wife at his home in Washington, D.C. D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department thought it was serious enough to send the U.S. Attorney's Office, which handles both federal and local crimes in Washington, D.C., a warrant for Mills' arrest. But as Politico puts it, he turned to Politico for this one, that warrant was never signed. Paperwork, man. It's certainly the case that prosecutors can decide that the evidence brought to them by police is deficient for arrest and prosecution isn't warranted. They're the critical deciders, not the police. But at least on the basis of the evidence suggested in press reports, it seems highly likely that a physical altercation took place and that it was one that left this woman visibly bruised. And remember who the prosecutor is. It's acting U.S. Attorney Ed Martin, the guy who's been in charge of running interference for the January 6th insurrectionists, and now is threatening to prosecute Chuck Schumer, and just said today, I guess yesterday, that he's President Trump's lawyer, standing against entities like the AP that refuse to put America first. Isn't that something? Yeah, he keeps releasing statements describing himself in the role of U.S. Attorney as, well, I'm the lawyer for the president. Yeah, that's exactly what you're not ever supposed to say about your role. In other words, Martin is a thoroughgoing hack who is using his position as a purely partisan personal agent of Donald Trump. Is it possible that a warrant was rejected, or if you look closely, was just ignored because Mills is a sitting Republican congressman and Republicans only have a 2-vote margin in the House and are struggling to pass anything because of that margin? Maybe. Although Josh says it's pretty obvious, and I have to agree. It does seem rather suspicious, don't you think? All right, let's see. Other things to share with you. As I mentioned, the proceedings in court over the various things that DOGE has been involved in has been very interesting. Let's see. Is this a New York Times piece that I happen to have parked here? The one about this one, this proceeding. There's a particular proceeding in front of, and it is. And there's also been plenty of reporting on the spot via social media of the proceedings here. But this will give us a published background on it. New York Times piece by Alan Feuer and titled Judge Questions Constitutionality of Musk's Cost-Cutting Operation. And it's a tremendous benefit of the doubt to Musk by calling it a cost-cutting operation. The judge expressed concern over the unresolved issues about who is in charge of Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency if it's not Mr. Musk, as the White House has claimed. We've definitely made mention of this on the show in the past couple of days, that in court, in order to escape, liability for and to bog down the proceedings further so that they don't get anywhere with them, the DOJ and representing DOGE here in court has been insisting rather ridiculously that they don't know who is in charge of DOGE, so that no one, so no consequences can be brought down on him, but also so that they have to dawdle in reaching a real conclusion in court. A federal judge in Washington, Feuer reports, said on Monday that the way the Trump administration set up and has been running Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency may violate the Constitution. That is sad, isn't it? The skepticism expressed by the judge, Colleen Kolar-Kotelly, I'm not certain how the emphasis falls there, but I'm familiar with the judge's name, Colleen Kolar-Kotelly, did not come as part of a binding ruling, but it suggested that there could be problems looming for Mr. Musk's organization, which is also known as the U.S. DOGE Service. Remember, there's the department. No, it's not a department. All right, it's U.S. DOGE Service. All right, but it's also U.S. DOGE Temporary Service Organization.org.com.edu. Sure. Based on the limited record I have before me, I have some concerns about the constitutionality of USDS's structure and operations. Judge Kolar Koteli said at a hearing in federal district court in Washington. She expressed particular concern that it violated the Appointments Clause of the Constitution, which requires leaders of federal agencies to be nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. Mr. Musk was neither nominated nor confirmed. I'll give you a topic. Mr. Musk was neither nominated nor confirmed. Discuss. Judge Kolar Koteli's remarks about the Musk operation were part of a civil case brought by two labor unions and a group representing millions of American retirees. They are seeking an injunction that would bar the Musk team from accessing sensitive records maintained by the Treasury Department. Last week, a federal judge in Manhattan, entertaining a similar legal issue, banned Mr. Musk's cost-cutting group from regaining access to the Treasury Department's payments and data systems until the conclusion of a separate lawsuit, claiming that its access to the records is unlawful. The suits are among several challenging Mr. Musk's wide-ranging efforts to scrutinize government spending and slash federal workforces, which have spawned dueling directives, of course, from Mr. Musk and the heads of various federal agencies, as well as termination notices that were quickly rescinded. And we've had another such group of people having their firings rescinded in the last day or so, which is good news for them, but, bad news for actually trying to run a government, of course. And I'm not even certain how good the news really ends up being for these guys. Some of the suits have directly questioned the constitutionality of the Musk operation, but Judge Kolar Koteli was the first federal judge handling one of the cases to hint at how she might rule on that critical issue. So we probably won't get all the way to it before we jump out for the break, but we can get to it afterwards. Let's set it up. The judge also indicated that she had serious concerns about how the organization is being run. Her concerns emerged from unresolved questions about who is in charge at U.S. DOGE Service and what role Mr. Musk plays in its operations. At the hearing, the judge repeatedly asked the lawyer for the government, Bradley Humphreys, to identify the service's administrator. He was unable to answer her. All right, welcome back now to Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with this one. Might also jump back and read that previous article about the other previous questions, unresolved questions about who's in charge at DOGE. Just as a reminder, at the hearing, Judge Kolar Koteli repeatedly asked the lawyer for the government, Bradley Humphreys, just in case I faded out at this point, Bradley Humphreys was asked repeatedly to identify the service's administrator. Just tell me who's in charge. It says here, and this is being kind, he was unable to answer her. And that's true. It's just a question of because he doesn't know, or because he's prohibited from answering, or he's trying to do some sort of weird legal dance. Not really sure which, if not all of them, is behind all of this. Judge Kolar Koteli asked Humphreys what position Mr. Musk holds. It was the exchanges are really rather astonishing, and I'll pull up a couple of Blue Sky posts of transcripts from the hearing that will make it clear. But yeah, basically she's like, all right, so was he appointed? If so, where's the paperwork? Well, no, he wasn't. He's not in charge. Well, then what is he doing there? I don't know. Well, then who's in charge? I don't know. Well, then what is Mr. Musk's role? We keep reading about him in the newspaper, and he keeps, bursting into places and firing people or demanding that they email him. What is his job? I don't know. Well, then who's doing all of this stuff? I don't know. Well, then what are you here for? You're extraordinarily poorly prepared for an attorney appearing in court on behalf of the administration. It's really kind of an embarrassment. And, it is. But he's still there and he won't leave. I don't know. It's very odd. Scott, thanks for... Scott has sent me something that... helps, I guess, describe some of the back and forth between the judge and the attorney here, in case we can't come up with the blue sky posts. But yeah, this is rather amazing. So the judge asks Mr. Humphreys what position Musk holds. Humphreys responded that Mr. Musk was not the DOGE services administrator or even an employee of the organization at all, echoing what a White House official had declared in a separate case challenging the powers of the group. But of course, complete contradiction from public statements by the President of the United States, who you're supposed to be able to count on for these things. I wouldn't count on this one. But you're supposed to be able to count on it when he says, I appointed a guy named Mr. Elon Musk. Maybe you've heard of him, to head this fantastic thing. You appointed him, did you? There would be paper with that. Not in the Trump administration, there wouldn't be. Again, going back to Trump and paperwork, man. I mean, it's definitely been my thing. There's always going to be a mistake in Trump paperwork. Always. And I know it seems like, less than the kind of headline grabbing fight that people want to see, but you're always going to find something wrong with the paperwork somewhere. Go ahead and look at it and start there. When the judge pressed Humphreys on what Mr. Musk's job actually was, Mr. Humphreys said, quote, I don't have any information beyond he's a close advisor to the president. That exchange seemed to irk Judge Kolar-Koteli, who signaled her skepticism about the organization's structure and powers. It does seem to me, if you have people that are not authorized to carry out some of these functions that they're carrying out, that does raise an issue, she said. I would hope that by now we would know who is the administrator, who is the acting administrator, and what authority do they have. Well, you would hope that, wouldn't you? Now, in the course of this article, Fuhr refers back to a February 18th piece, a million years ago. It's a week old at this point. This one written by Theodore Schleifer, I don't know how, again, that Schleifer, Schleifer, perhaps, who runs Elon Musk's DOGE. Not Musk, the White House says, sometimes. A White House official declared that Mr. Musk was not the administrator of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, so who is? It's a week later, they haven't been able to nail this down. Who exactly runs the so-called Department of Government Efficiency? You might think it would be Elon Musk, the man who President Trump said, quote, will lead the Department of Government Efficiency, unquote, alongside, of course, Vivek Ramaswamy, before Mr. Ramaswamy stepped away from it last month. But when Mr. Trump set up the cost-cutting body, and it isn't one, in an executive order on his first day, the order did not say who its, quote, administrator would be. Section 3B of the order reads, there shall be a USDS administrator established in the executive office of the president, who shall report to the White House Chief of Staff, using the abbreviation for United States DOGE Service, the official name of the effort, which is not actually a cabinet-level department. Last week, White House representatives did not respond to repeated requests to identify that administrator. And they keep claiming that the authority for everything comes from, remember, EO, question mark, maybe? Where's your authority come from? The EO, I think. And the EO describes that there's been there will be appointed an administrator. Have you appointed that person? Shouldn't that person's signature be on any paperwork instructing me to do something under the authority of this allegedly newly created organization? Yes. Well, then, okay, where is it? Hamana. And that's all you get. But you are definitely fired, except we're rehiring you tomorrow allegedly because we didn't mean to fire you. We actually need your expertise. But also, by the way, we were never authorized to fire you in the first place. I mean, that's what's going on here. So where were we with this? Right. Not only describing that it's not actually a cabinet level department, but that it was supposed to have an administrator, according to the very executive order they're pointing to all the time. Then on Monday evening, and remember, this is a piece from February 18th, a White House official stated plainly that, quote, Mr. Musk is not the U.S. DOGE Service Administrator, unquote. The official, Joshua Fisher, made the statement in a declaration to a judge. This time it was Tanya Chutkan, who is hearing a case filed by the Democratic Attorneys General against Mr. Musk and the DOGE effort. That's the 14-state effort that we talked about last week. Mr. Fisher added that Mr. Musk was, quote, an employee in the White House office, unquote. And we weren't sure even what they meant by the White House office, the White House Executive Office of the President, EOP, as they usually call it, and not an employee of the U.S. DOGE service. Mr. Trump often talks about Mr. Musk as the functional leader of the DOGE effort, featuring him in a news conference last week where Mr. Musk answered questions about it. A lot of secrecy has surrounded DOGE despite Mr. Musk's attempts to position it as, quote, maximally transparent. Who's the leader of it? Can't tell you. That's not maximally transparent. That is not transparent at all. It's not even minimally transparent. The White House's unwillingness to state who its administrator is only adds to that sense of opacity and also illegality. DOGE's predecessor organization, the U.S. Digital Service, had administrators whose roles were public. Most recently, one Mina Hsiang, I don't know how that's pronounced, Hsiang, Sang, perhaps? Leaders of Mr. Musk's efforts who could conceivably be its administrator include, let's see, Steve Davis, that's Mr. Musk's right-hand man for 2 decades, who has overseen the day-to-day work of his efforts in Washington. Could be Brad Smith, an official in the first Trump administration who had been intimately involved in DOGE's moves. A White House spokesperson did not respond to another request for comment on Monday evening in response to Mr. Fisher's declaration. The administrator, whoever it might be, has or would have, if they were actually appointed, several powers according to the executive order anyway. Those include helping agency heads choose their DOGE team members and starting a, quote, software modernization initiative to update the government's technology. A second executive order released last week, I guess now 2 weeks ago, said the DOGE administrator would receive a monthly hiring report from each federal agency and would submit a report in 240 days to Mr. Trump on the order's implementation. We don't even know who's supposed to do this, so they're way behind on getting their report done. It is not known who that report's author will be. And that's the end of Theodore Schlafer's report on the subject. Let's see what Scott has sent me and what that might add to it, and then we'll see if we can't pull up the various blue sky exchanges and give credit to the people who were on top of the story yesterday. This from Reuters. Musk gives federal workers a second chance to defend their jobs or get fired. He sent down another round of, no, this time you should definitely answer me with the 5 bullet points thing, even though it's coming from ostensibly OPM and then being followed up by other agency-wide and government-wide emails also from OPM saying, no, you don't have to answer. And then that is then followed by a second email from Elon Musk from another OPM address saying, yes, you do. That's what people are dealing with. Everybody has to come back to the office and then deal with this. James Oliphant writing this piece for Reuters. Let's see what's up here. A message from Elon Musk asserting that federal employees will be given, quote, a second chance to respond to his ultimatum that they justify their jobs or risk termination is likely to spark another round of confusion across the U.S. government on Tuesday. Musk's warning on X, of course, not anything, official or anything like that, came after Trump administration officials told federal workers they, quote, or I'm not a quote, but Trump administration officials told federal workers they did not have to respond to his weekend email, by the way, asking them to summarize their accomplishments for the past week. Failure to reply would be considered a resignation, Musk has claimed. But while some federal agencies such as the U.S. Treasury Department told their workers to comply, others, like the Pentagon, did not. As Musk's Monday night deadline approached, the U.S. Office of Personnel Management ultimately told agencies that their workers could ignore the email. Musk, the billionaire CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, who has been tasked by the president to lead a radical downsizing of the federal government, seemed undeterred. Quote, subject to the discretion of the president, they will be given another chance. Failure to respond a second time will result in termination, he wrote on X late on Monday. And he may, in fact, have been on X to see when he wrote it, but that's not what they mean by that. And interesting. I mean, this is gonna end up hurting him if he can't deliver on his threats. I mean, this just seems like a strategic error, but I'm not advising him, and I wouldn't advise him anyway, even if he asked. The White House did not respond to a request for comment on Musk's remarks. Prior to the new OPM guidance, Trump told reporters on Monday that workers who did not respond would be, ready for this one, quote, sort of semi-fired, unquote, adding to the uncertainty. Yeah, I would say so. He doesn't even know whether, he's in charge, Musk's in charge, sort of semi-fired. I like that. That's a great tagline. Is that something new from The Apprentice? You're sort of semi-fired. I'm not really sure what to do with you. Musk's downsizing initiative, by the way, I mean, really, just give away the pants, why don't you? Gosh. Musk's downsizing initiative, executed by his so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, has led to the layoff of more than 20,000 workers. The administration has separately offered buyouts to 75,000 employees, maybe. The vast majority of terminations have involved probationary employees who started their positions less than a year ago and thus enjoy fewer legal job protections than the career civil servants who make up most of the 2.3 million strong federal workforce. But OPM has begun firing career workers within its own agency in a rapid-fire process that sources told Reuters is intended to serve as a template for a second round of mass layoffs across the government. OPM has moved unusually quickly in an effort to demonstrate to other agencies what can be done, one source said. And then a note about new fissures in the Trump administration. Musk's email threat and the pushback he saw from federal agencies cracked open new fissures within Trump's nascent administration and raised questions about the limits of Musk's authority, even after OPM's guidance, which urged employees not to share classified or sensitive information in responding to Musk. Some agency officials still nudged their employees to answer the email. The head of the Small Business Administration, Kelly Loeffler, remember her, backed Musk's email requirement in a Fox News interview on Tuesday. We just want to know, are there people there doing their jobs? And again, the bar is so low, it's laughable. Loeffler said, so why bother with it, I would ask. I look forward to making sure that we get all the responses back, and for those that we don't, we'll have decisions to make. Yeah, you don't know either, do you? A senior manager at the General Services Administration, which manages federal buildings, told employees that the agency was still encouraging workers to respond even though it was voluntary. Similarly, the got another chance to use our sound effect. Acting director at OPM itself sent an email to the agency staff and said responding with bullet points was voluntary but strongly encouraged. Meanwhile, the Department of Health and Human Services advised employees that if they chose to reply, they should keep their responses general in nature and refrain from identifying specific drugs or contracts they're working on, according to an email reviewed by Reuters. Assume what you will write will be read by malign foreign actors and tailor your response accordingly, the email said. And I know that was supposed to mean that the information could leak. It's not going over secure networks. So be aware that that could end up in the hands of malign foreign actors. But I would tell you to read it this way. You are addressing this information to Elon Musk, and you should assume that he is a malign foreign actor. That's the way it should be read. Musk's slash and burn approach has rippled into the wider U.S. economy as well, forcing companies that do business with the government to lay off workers and defer payments to vendors. Since taking office on January 20th, Trump has frozen billions of dollars in foreign assistance and effectively dismantled the USAID, which administers some 60% of U.S. foreign assistance, stranding medicine and food in warehouses. In some cases, the government has scrambled to rehire workers who perform critical functions like nuclear weapons oversight and bird flu response. On Monday, a group of labor unions that have asked a federal judge to stop the mass firings updated their lawsuit to request that Musk's threatening email be ruled illegal. At the same time, a federal judge blocked the DOGE team from accessing sensitive data maintained by the Education Department and the OPM, not just the Treasury. Unlike cabinet appointees and appointees to head up independent federal agencies, Musk's appointment requires no approval by the U.S. Senate. So that much easier than just to sign the damn paperwork and get him appointed. For some strange reason, they continue not to file this paperwork. All right. Let's see whether there's any other information out here. I just want to see if I can find you these exchanges that Anna Bauer on Blue Sky, who's been extremely active in screenshotting and sharing pages from the transcript of this hearing. She is the senior editor at lawfaremedia.org. And I guess basically spent the whole day on it, and with good reason. It's really rather astonishing. And I guess maybe I'll go over to her feed and just read you some of the things that she's been sharing with people. I'm going to have to scroll back a ways to see where she began doing this. I think this is from yesterday evening, in which she grabs this exchange between, as we mentioned, the DOJ attorney is Bradley Humphreys and Judge Kolar Koteli. Beginning here, Humphreys saying, "When I'm referring to the Treasury DOGE team, I'm referring to Mr. Krause previously, Mr. Elez, and now Mr. Wunderly." Okay. The judge, though, responds, "I mean, with Mr. Krause, it looks like there's no administrator telling him anything. I'm still having trouble grasping how they're going out as a team if nobody's telling them what to do other than the executive order. And it doesn't sound like you've prepared for these questions," which is unfortunate. And Anna just saying, yes, unfortunate indeed. Yeah, that's really rather astonishing, right? Who's doing what at Treasury? Well, it's these three people. All right, well, who's telling those three people what to do? Those three people we know their names, but they're from out of nowhere. Why are they there? Presumably at someone's direction. Whose? No answer for that, intentionally. Here's another exchange here. We don't, Anna comments here, again, on all caps. She loves commenting in all caps on this because it's astonishing. "We don't know who is actually doing these things. Indeed. What's happening here?" The judge says, "But as I understand it, there is no administrator." You keep telling me that there's no name here for this, and you don't know it. So what the executive order says that the administrator is supposed to be doing at USDS is not happening. And at this point, we don't know who is actually doing these things that the administrator was supposed to do. Is that fair? Is that a fair encapsulation of what's happening? She asks Humphreys. Humphreys says, "I think that's fair." Again, the mission of the executive order was to modernize the technology, and she stops him. Right. But who decides the modernization? Or who decides what to do with the modernization? Well, really what this exchange and all of these exchanges is about is these guys keep pointing to the executive order as their authority, and they have nowhere else to turn. I mean, there isn't anything besides the executive order that even, create. This is why everyone was saying, if it's going to be a department, or even if it's just a new agency, really Congress has to authorize and create this thing. If you're going to create it with an executive order, that's highly questionable. But if you do that, then the only possible source of authority for this thing is the executive order. You look in it and it says things are supposed to be done. Okay, fine. How? By whom? By when? In what form? All the things that these guys think don't matter. And this is why they can't do any paperwork. It's just too much trouble for them. Why don't we just declare that it exists? Why don't we just declare that it has a goal? Okay, but then you need to declare who's going to run it. No, we don't. Well, then this is what's going to happen to you when you're asked by the judge. The judge is going to say, who decides? You say that this mission is modernization? Yes. All right. Who's doing the modernizing? Well, as we've described, Mr. Krause was selected because he has a wealth of experience. Okay, And I love that they think that's the answer. Well, who's doing it then? Mr. Krause. Okay. And who selected Mr. Krause? That's the question. Mr. Krause was selected because he has a wealth of experience. Selected by whom? Well, he was appointed by the Treasury in conjunction with USDS officially. The judge says, by USDS? But there's no administrator? Humphreys answers, I don't know specifically the person who consulted with the Secretary. Secretary of the Treasury is who you're talking about. You don't know? That's the director of USDS. You just said that that's who did it. So who's that person? Gee whiz, I guess I just don't know. Here's another exchange here. The judge saying, the executive order states that agency heads shall select DOGE team members in consultation with the USDS administrator. It seems there's no administrator to consult with. Who did the Treasury Secretary consult with when he hired Mr. Krause? And the executive order states the USDS administrator shall commence a software modernization initiative. Has the initiative been commenced? By whom? If there's no administrator, who did it? Humphreys answers, the team is going about modernizing and improving legacy systems. What team? And it's got 2 question marks in this transcript. She interrupts him. The team is going about what team? Who? And I guess that's where he says, well, when I'm referring to the Treasury DOGE team, I'm referring to Mr. Krause previously, Mr. Elez, and now Mr. Wonderly. That's where that came from. That's not the beginning of the transcript. So now we know where that fits. And the judge says, well, look, with Mr. Krause, it looks like there's no administrator telling him anything. I'm still having trouble grasping how they're going out as a team if nobody's telling them what to do other than the executive order. And it doesn't sound like you've prepared for these questions, which is unfortunate. That is rather amazing. Here's another exchange. I guess it's a little bit out of order, but I want to read through it. The judge saying, but as I understand it, there is no administrator. So what the executive order says that the administrator is supposed to be doing at USDS is not happening. And at this point, we don't know who is actually doing these things that the administrator was supposed to do. Is that fair? We had that exchange before. I think that is fair. Again, the mission of the executive order was to modernize the technology. Right. But who decides? Well, Mr. Krause, he was selected. Selected by whom? Appointed by the Treasury in conjunction with USDS. Yeah, but how could you be in conjunction with USDS if there's no administrator? Yeah, that's the problem. Here's another exchange Judge Kohler Kotali has. Okay, so is there an administrator of DOGE at the present time? Ready for this? Humphrey says, I don't know the answer to that. You don't know whether there's an administrator? Is that what you're saying? I'm saying I don't know. The judge, it notes here in the stage directions, essentially written into the transcript, the judge directing her attention to Humphreys' co-counsel. Okay, everybody at the table over there, speak up if you know anything else. Silence. Just silence. That's what's going on in the exchange. Wow. So is there an administrator? I don't know. You're saying you don't know? I'm saying I don't know. Golly, that's rather concerning. And it's the sort of thing that's going to get you found to have been unconstitutionally established. That is essentially what's going on here. And as I was saying about paperwork, Trump and paperwork, we keep pointing this out, and it's true over and over and over again. But yeah, I mean, this was easily avoided, to say the very least, and yet it wasn't. It's just not on Trump's radar how to avoid these things. He doesn't know how to do it. He doesn't care to try to do it. It's upsetting, to say the least. And it's going to end up well, we'll be at a stalemate. And I guess they're just wasting time until they can get around to making this into a Supreme Court case and then just rolling the dice on whether or not their 6-3 advantage just legalizes this stuff out of thin air. This could all have been avoided by just doing the one thing that Trump loves more than anything else, which is signing official-looking documents. Just appoint an administrator. Does it have to be Elon Musk? It doesn't. It just has to be somebody. He just won't do it. And until you do it, you're in violation of the Appointments Clause. And if you're in violation of the Appointments Clause, you're in violation of the Constitution. If you're in violation of the Constitution, everything you're doing is invalid and can and should be undone. The question is, can they unwind it legally without creating more chaos and confusion later?
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, yes, what I was saying about this stuff last night was, while Trump can't stop doing his favorite thing, every day he wants to go into the Oval Office and sign things, to look like he's doing important stuff. But somehow the one thing he has refused to sign so far is any paperwork naming a DOGE administrator. That he won't do. And that was the paperwork that he needed in order to avoid this problem. There's more that you should have done in order to avoid this problem, and the Appointments Clause may or may not require, in certain circumstances. It seems like there's still confusion about whether or not the DOGE administrator would need Senate approval. I could see it not being the case, but perhaps, but I guess I'd have to look up all the requirements of it at a certain level and how they decide and how they define who needs Senate approval. But, typically just at the top levels of, agencies, independent agencies, certainly, and cabinet departments. So it's entirely possible that he wouldn't have had to go through the confirmation process, which I could certainly see someone like Elon Musk, chafing at. But it may also be that once you're appointed, you might have to do certain financial disclosure. And, could it all be about that? Could it all just be, I don't want to do a financial disclosure? Okay, you could do a straw man, a pass-through kind of thing, and make the administrator someone else who will feel compelled to listen to each of Elon Musk's individual whims as they go about their business. And I'm not certain that would pass constitutional muster, but at least you'd be able to answer these questions in court. Like, you had to know that this is what you were going to be asked. And he had to be sweating it, knowing that he was going to go into court and possibly be, who knows what, fined, yelled at by a judge. It's very uncomfortable to stand there and say dumb stuff like, I don't know who's in charge, when everybody kind of knows who is in charge. But, it would be amazing if all this stuff was undone because Trump wouldn't sign a paper. That's all. He loves signing papers. That's everything he enjoys about the job. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. And I was making that comment paired along with someone else's comment who says, I love how committed Elon is to publicly saying things that can be used as evidence of an appointments clause violation. Who says this? Sybil Trelawney. I'm guessing at pronunciation of the last name, but just someone who was commenting on, other blue sky denizens, bigger names, I guess, talking about this of Josh Marshall, Ron Filipkowski, who's grabbed a screenshot of Elon's discussion of stuff on Twitter, on X, saying this was his second chance email, subject to the discretion of the president. They'll be given a second chance. Failure to respond to a second time will result in termination. This is Elon Musk, by the way, responding to Matt Walsh on Twitter about this stuff. And subject to the discretion of the president, given another chance, I'm going to terminate you if you don't da. And this is what Sybil's talking about. I love how committed Elon is to publicly saying things that can be used as evidence of an appointments clause violation. Well, this all seems to indicate that Elon Musk thinks he's in charge here, but there's no appointment for him. So to the extent that what you're doing over at DOGE is at Elon Musk's direction or even in compliance with his whims, I got to tell you, if you don't have an appointed administrator, none of this stuff sticks, says the judge. So it will be interesting, to say the least, to see how this shakes out. All right, let's see. Other things that there are many other directions that we can and should be going. I mentioned to you that there was another rehiring of people initially dismissed. We heard that about the nuclear security folks. The FDA has done the same. FDA moves to rehire medical device staffers fired only days earlier, according to NBC News, this time out of New York. Any number of other things to share with you here. Let me click on some of these hidden blue sky items to see what they're about. Oh, yes. Follow up from yesterday's story. Someone over in Blue Sky has grabbed a screenshot of a press release from the Coeur d'Alene Police Department. The city of Coeur d'Alene has revoked the business license of Lear Asset Management, as they threatened to do yesterday. The security goons who dragged a woman out of a town hall with lawmakers over the weekend. And because we read the detailed report from the local paper, we recall that it's required by city ordinance that people who are hired as private security have got to wear gear that clearly identifies them, and right down to how big the lettering has to be on what part of the uniform that says security. The fact that they were in plain clothes, unmarked as security, it is enough to jeopardize their licensure, and the city is getting ready to do it, or has done it. Let's see what the language is that they use here. The Coeur d'Alene Police Department is investigating the incident. They recount what the incident was. The fact that city police officers were available outside but were never called. Since the initial investigation, officers and detectives have continued to investigate the incident. After reviewing all new evidence all new evidence and video related to the event, the city prosecuting attorney's office has moved to dismiss the citation against Borenpaul in the interests of justice. The business license for Lear Asset Management has been revoked for violating Coeur d'Alene city ordinances regarding security agencies and agents. It doesn't say how or by what mechanism that was done. That's a little bit concerning, but I'm sure they have their internal processes. And if they don't, Lear will have cause to appeal the decision. But in Coeur d'Alene, as far as the police department is concerned, they view that license as having been revoked. So I found that interesting. Thought I would add that to the mix. Let's see. There are a million other things. One other thing that probably also ought to be in the mix here, a lot of NBC News sourced stories here. This one I'm just going to, I think, give you the headline, because what else do you really need to know? about a story like this. DOGE, it says, will use AI, if you can believe it. I know, that's hard to believe. They'll use AI to assess the responses of federal workers who were told to justify their jobs via email. So if you answer any of this, they're going to feed it into an AI something or other and then ask AI, is this person doing a job that's worth keeping or should we fire them? And I don't know whether they're going to abide by the decision of AI, but if you've ever asked AI anything, including how many letters there are in a certain word, and it gives you the wrong answer, I don't think you're going to want the hiring and firing decisions over your job, certainly, made by something that dumb. But that's what they say they're going to do. Responses to the Elon Musk directed email to government employees about what work they had accomplished in the last week are expected to be fed into an artificial intelligence system to determine whether those jobs are necessary, according to 3 sources with knowledge of the system. So that'll be done wrong. Just wanted you to know that and that it was happening. You probably guessed they were going to do something that dumb. No one would be able to read all those emails, but why do anything with them at all? That I'm not really sure. Okay, let's see. What's this one here? CNN. This one I thought was an interesting description of what it's like to be in the federal workforce at the moment, or it certainly could be that. I haven't read through it yet. CNN's article byline here for Tammy Luby, Luhby, Renee Marsh, Ella Nilsson, and Sunlen Sarfati. Hope I got all of that right. It's bedlam. That's the quote that's borrowed for the headline here. It's bedlam. Federal workers left in limbo as clock ticks down to Musk's email deadlines. So just give you a sense of what's going on here, what people are thinking about. Federal workers spent Monday trying to figure out how or even whether to respond to Elon Musk's weekend email blast telling them to explain their work last week or risk losing their job. And so for idiots like Kelly Loeffler and others who say this was a minimal ask, Elon keeps saying it. Matt Walsh was part of the chorus saying it. Not that he matters for anything, but it's so easy. Just tell them 5 things. And if you can't do that, then you deserve to be fired. But you instead have to spend all of Monday reading over and trying to parse through Elon's email, reading through and trying to parse his texts or his posts on Twitter/X, and then reading through the Code of Federal Regulations that's been cited in an email from another part of OPM. You got to spend all day trying to figure out which one of these contradictory instructions are the ones you're supposed to answer and deal with. A day of confusing and often contradictory guidance left many federal workers still unclear ultimately how to handle Musk's request. Some were told to comply, others were advised not to, still others were awaiting instructions from their agency's leaders until late in the day. Speaking from the Oval Office on Monday afternoon, President Donald Trump called Musk's email demand ingenious and said that anyone who didn't respond is, quote, semi-fired or fired. 2 weeks, I'm sure, was probably involved in that comment as well. Then, by the way, how strong was that comment? You're semi-fired or fired. I don't know. They said I could say either one. They said I could call them both. Then a couple hours later, Trump's own administration directly contradicted the old man when the Office of Personnel Management formally notified agencies that response was voluntary and that any failure to respond would, quote, not equate to a resignation, unquote. While some agencies conveyed that message in their guidance to employees, not all did, leaving many federal workers in the dark just hours before Musk's supposed deadline of 11:59 p.m. Monday. Our chief said it was mandatory. Then OPM said it became voluntary. Then I guess Trump just told us it was mandatory again, said one career employee with the Department of Veterans Affairs. No one knows who is in charge and who to listen to. And just as the judge was complaining, no one even knows who's issuing these instructions and why. It's bedlam, added one IRS employee. CNN spoke to federal employees across multiple agencies on Monday. All but one asked not to use their names for fear of retribution. Some of the most high-profile federal agencies ended up bucking Musk's demands, with the Justice Department, State Department, Pentagon, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Energy, all telling their staff not to respond to the email. While the Commerce and Transportation departments all instructed their staffs on Monday to comply, Commerce asked employees to send the information to their supervisors, not Elon. Among the transportation employees who need to reply are FAA and their chronically understaffed air traffic controller workforce. Many controllers are working mandatory overtime, 6 days, weeks, and 10-hour shifts, but do this work too. On Saturday, their union, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, denounced the move by Musk as a distraction to controllers during a time when the air safety system is fragile. NASA, on the other hand, said it will respond on behalf of the agency, adding that workers are not required to answer OPM's email and that their employment will not be affected if they opt not to respond. Ironically, employees at OPM, the agency that sent the initial email, were left in the dark about how to handle the instructions themselves until about 6 p.m. Monday, when they finally got guidance saying a response was voluntary but strongly encouraged, according to an email obtained by CNN. Today was crazy, is the next part. The chaos began Saturday, not long after a mass email from OPM landed, allegedly I would say from OPM, landed in the inboxes of federal workers across the country. Work was disrupted in some agencies as staffers and officials sat in on hastily assembled meetings and tried to decipher a multitude of emails. Agency heads debated how to respond to Musk's demands, several sources told CNN. And the judge spent yesterday trying to determine whether or why anyone would respond to Musk for anything. David J. Demas, D-E-M-A-S, president of the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 3003, which represents 320 Federal Bureau of Prisons workers, said he received 30 phone calls from members on Monday who work at U.S. Penitentiary Canaan in Waymart, Pennsylvania, asking how to respond to OPM's email. Some workers who were off duty wanted to know whether they needed to come to the prison to reply, since they don't have access to their work email on their phones or home computers. And those who were working asked for guidance on what to include in their 5 bullet points. Today was crazy. A lot of people were coming in from being off to try to send an email, a silly email that doesn't even make sense to us, said Demas, who also woke up at 3 a.m. Monday to find 3 text messages and 10 emails from worried members. Just before 11 a.m. on Monday, DOGE sent an email to workers saying that they did not need to respond, which Demas then relayed to his colleagues. At another government facility, officials set up a room to allow employees without computer access, including janitors, to go online to send their accomplishments during the prior week, one federal worker told CNN. At the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, one worker told CNN, they haven't done any of my actual duties due to the email and having to respond to those below me and trying to get clarification from those above me. Like at multiple other agencies, the guidance from NOAA supervisors and leaders shifted with the latest instructions coming from a high-ranking official at the Department of Commerce who said staffers should provide the 5 bullet points on their work activities to their supervisors by the deadline. NOAA is, of course, part of Commerce. Another Department of Veterans Affairs staffer told CNN they had to attend multiple meetings on Monday about the directive, which interfered with doing their job. That's all time taken away from patient care, said the employee whose leadership recommended that staffers reply to OPM's email. It's totally disruptive. At the Department of HHS, a sprawling federal agency with thousands of workers, employees were told that if they were going to respond to the Musk email, they should refrain from being descriptive and keep answers as general as possible. Remember, these were the guys that said, assume what you write will be read by malign foreign actors, and tailor your response accordingly. Some federal workers took a more sarcastic approach, at least among themselves. At the IRS, one group of colleagues came up with activities they performed last week as a fake response to Musk's email, and the list included fought the BS you started, kept the employees from beating up their managers, kept your equipment in a working condition without it being thrown against the damn wall, helped the employees understand that this was the new administration's decision and not management, and trying to minimize the fear, confusion, and anger you caused for no reason during tax season. Yeah. That's what you'll get it from the IRS. Video screens, by the way, this one, Greg sent me this right after he departed yesterday's show, and I didn't get a chance to add it back in, but here's news that you might have heard. Video screens at the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. on Monday played a fake video of Trump kissing Musk's toes, featuring the words, "Long live the real king." It was later removed and replaced with information showcasing the wins of the Trump administration, the agency said in a statement. But the big news was they got there and the muckety-mucks could not figure out how to get this thing off the screens. It was playing on every screen in the building and they couldn't stop it. Pretty funny. At the EPA, where staffers were told to comply with Musk's demand, but to do so without divulging certain sensitive information, some workers bristled at the mixed message. "Nobody has a spine," said one EPA worker, because EPA is a target. They're trying to play nice with them, thinking that might make them not subject to deeper cuts. When you appease a bully, give them license to come after you more. And, of course, speaking of having no spine, Trump in the Oval Office, they're sort of semi-fired or fired. I love that. A State Department official said, "People are confused. On the one hand, employees want to showcase the important work they're doing, but there is concern about responding from individual email accounts and not knowing where the information's going," said the official. "I suspect all federal employees everywhere feel conflicted and deeply disturbed by the derogatory narrative coming from our government." In his Oval Office remarks on Monday, Trump suggested that employees who didn't reply might not be working at all. "We have to find out where these people are. Who are they? Who's your administrator of DOGE?" No answer to that one. This is while he was hosting French President Emmanuel Macron, by the way. "And we said, if you don't respond, we assume you're not around. And you're not getting paid anymore, too." Musk, however, was undeterred. On Monday evening, he posted on X, subject to the discretion of the president. Sure. A second chance. All right. Well, that's where we stand with that one. Other couple things to share with you. Why don't should I try this one? This is an opinion piece from David French, which it might have been something that Greg shared with me in the list of his raft of stories, but that we didn't get to. That is of some interest, although, David French, always a grain of salt, but back on the political union with Russia problem that he is addressing here. Why not? We'll read through it and then take our exit for the day and then try once again to pick up on the backlog of stories still in existence here. He writes, "I grew up a Reagan Republican, we all know that, in the middle of the Cold War, and I never thought I'd see the day when the President of the United States became the world's most prominent and effective Russian propagandist. And yet, that is exactly what happened last week when President Trump began a diplomatic offensive against the nation of Ukraine and the person of President Volodymyr Zelensky. This month, the administration couldn't seem to get its message straight. First, it seemed to want to offer unilateral concessions to the Russian government, including by taking NATO membership for Ukraine off the table and recognizing Russia's territorial gains in Ukraine, only to walk back those concessions days or even hours later. The cumulative effect was confusing. What was the administration's position on Ukraine? Last week, however, the words and actions of the administration left us with no doubt the United States is taking Russia's side in the conflict. What other conclusion should we draw? When Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, begins peace negotiations with Russia without Ukraine or any NATO allies at the table, dangling historic economic and investment opportunities for Russia if the conflict ends. What other conclusion should we draw when Trump demands ruinous economic concessions from Ukraine to compensate America for its prior aid? He's demanding a higher share of gross domestic product from Ukraine than the victorious allies demanded from Germany after World War I. And we know what happened as a result of that. What other conclusions should we draw when Trump, incredibly enough, blames Ukraine for starting the conflict and calls Zelensky a dictator? What other conclusions should we draw when the Trump administration reportedly proposed sending Chinese soldiers to police a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, an act that would place troops from our chief geopolitical foe on Allied soil in the heart of Europe? As the noted Stanford political scientist Francis Fukuyama observed last week, but what does he care? He ended history. The United States under Donald Trump is not retreating into isolationism. It is actively joining the authoritarian camp, supporting right-wing authoritarians around the world, from Vladimir Putin to Viktor Orban to Nayib Bukele, who's I'm not familiar with, to Narendra Modi. By the way, Modi, did you happen to see this one? Visiting Washington and was granted a state visit style opportunity to consult with the U.S. government on U.S. government property, and he got sent Elon Musk. And worse than that, Modi and his cadre of advisors showed up, and they lined one part of the room in the chairs along the wall, only to find that they were not only going to be meeting with Elon Musk, but it was Elon Musk and 3 of his toddler kids, and one of them, like a mom and a I don't know who the second woman was. A nanny? Is it a government employee? I have no idea. And neither did Modi. But Modi sat there and took it, which is really rather amazing. A whole lineup of serious advisors from the Indian government, presumably serious advisors. Maybe they're idiots and clowns over in India like we are here. But 3 of Musk's kids picking their noses and staring at these guys. And Modi stayed, which is kind of amazing. Anyway, the conclusion, French says, is inescapable. As J.D. Vance said in his speech to the Munich Security Conference on February 14th, the administration is much more concerned about the enemy within, what it sees as censorship in Western Europe, than it is about hostile foreign powers. The pattern we're seeing abroad mimics the pattern we've been seeing at home. Trump's enemies are now the American government's enemies. There is one standard of justice for friends of Trump and another for everyone else. He began, of course, by pardoning his shock troops, the men and women who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, beat police officers, and then tried to disrupt the lawful transfer of power to Joe Biden. The full extent of Trump's January 6th pardons is only now coming into focus. DOJ officials are arguing that Trump's clemency even covers unrelated crimes, including gun crimes uncovered as part of the January 6th investigations. The favors haven't stopped. He pardoned former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich for no apparent legal reason at all, other than the fact that Blagojevich has declared himself a Trumpocrat. Emil Bove, Trump's former criminal defense lawyer and his acting deputy attorney general, ordered federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York to drop the corruption case against Eric Adams. Despite denials, the decision appears to be a pure quid pro quo. The case goes away so long as Adams cooperates with Trump's immigration enforcement policies. The decision was so improper, it triggered a righteous revolt in the DOJ. Conservative attorneys resigned, writing letters of resignation that outlined the course of events, exposed the flaws in the administration's legal rationale, and condemned the administration's misconduct. Danielle Sassoon, acting U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York and former law clerk for Scalia, led the way. Her letter to Pam Bondi was a masterclass in legal writing. I don't know if I would go that far, but she explained why her duties of candor to the federal court meant she could not in good conscience support the administration's position. But the most memorable words belong to Sassoon's colleague Hagan Skoton, conservative attorney and decorated veteran, who wrote words of dissent that should echo in the Department of Justice history. That one you heard was the one that ended up basically saying, I expect you'll eventually be able to find someone who's enough of a fool or a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me. At the same time, Trump is vengeful against his enemies. His decision to remove personal security from Anthony Fauci, Mike Pompeo, and John Bolton, and even worse, announce their vulnerability to the world, is petty, vindictive, and most important, dangerous to American lives. It's one thing for presidents to test the limits of their authority. Presidents of both parties have been pushing the envelope of presidential power for generations. In some cases, the Supreme Court has ratified their actions. In many others, it's rejected presidential power grabs. Some have argued that Trump is merely the culmination of a very long trend. His actions might be different in degree from other presidents, but not in kind. But no modern president has pushed as far and as fast as Trump, and no modern president has done so even as his team has laid the groundwork for breaking the final constitutional firewall by defying the Supreme Court. Trump likes to reassure us on this front. I always abide by the courts, as he put it recently, but that's not the consensus view in his own administration. Vance has threatened to defy court rulings. He said in 2021 that Trump should fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson and say, the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. Russell Vogt, Trump's director of OMB, has written that the right, quote, needs to throw off the precedents and legal paradigms that have wrongly developed over the last 200 years. Elon Musk has called for an immediate wave of judicial impeachments, an almost comically obvious effort to intimidate judges who are hearing challenges to Trump's actions. Compounding the crisis, an atmosphere of fear pervades the Republican Party. It's time for me to get out of here before I pervade Justice Putnam's program. But this true, those who cross the MAGA movement can expect threats and intimidation, not to mention a primary challenge backed by Musk's millions, billions in fact. As Gabriel Sherman reported last week in Vanity Fair, in private, Republicans talk about their fear of Trump and how it might incite his MAGA followers to commit political violence against him if they don't rubber stamp his actions. It's nothing new. It's happened before. There's a long history of it. And French goes over it at some length in the next couple paragraphs. But basically, there we are. I cannot recall a moment in which a president broke free of the bounds of law and morality so quickly and comprehensively. In 1 month, Trump has endorsed Russian propaganda, switched sides in the Ukraine war, threatened our closest allies, attacked the constitutional order, and begun imposing a two-tiered system of justice. The state of affairs is unrecognizable to most Americans, but Putin recognizes it. So does Xi Jinping. In Trump, they can plainly see a version of themselves. He is doing their work for them. He is damaging American democracy, diminishing American power, and destroying American alliances with an energy and efficiency that must exceed their wildest dreams. I guess so. We'll be back tomorrow to chronicle the rest of it, and now Justice Putnam takes over, doing the same and more with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yeah, he has his eye on the UN as well. The United States joining Russia and North Korea in the axis of evil, remember them, is a day that'll live in infamy. On the rest of his menu, Apple shareholders are expected to reject scrapping corporate programs designed to diversify its workforce. Golly, I hope they'll hang on to it, but who knows what punishment awaits. We'll see you tomorrow.